if you're a big portfolio company and you breach a covenant in one of your debt contracts, you call up your bank and they work out a plan. They're not like, great, the first thing I want to do is drive you into bankruptcy because there's not that much money there, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
If someone takes over long weekend tomorrow without you, they're not going to get all of the value that you can extract from it, right? There's a little bit of inventory, but someone's got to run that brand. Maybe they'll sell it to TJ Maxx for 10 cents on the dollar. You can get a lot more value out of it. So I always encourage people to make those calls and try and extend that runway.
This is Limited Supply, the place for refreshingly real takes on what D2C is really like.
We're your hosts, Nik and Moiz. Let's start talking about money.
So I love Tapcart. It's a drag and drop builder that turns your Shopify store into a native mobile app in just a few hours. The average time to launch an app live in the App Store is just about 2 weeks.
Crazy stats: average 43x ROI, high conversion and retention rates, 100% organic reach per push notification CTR 7x higher than email, over 92% engagement rate.
So Limited Supply listeners get their first 2 months of Tapcart for free. So you'll actually be able to launch your app live and test this new owned sales and marketing channel. Head to tapcart.com/limited. That is tapcart.com/limited to book a demo and start building your app today. You won't regret it. All right, we're back. Episode 5. We have officially cracked the top 10 according to the Chartable charts, which is, I think, the go-to. So we debuted at 5 in the US in marketing and 8 in the UK. We held steady in the UK. US, we dropped down to 13, but in the UK, they love us. So I think we've got like 6 fans in the UK.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm big in the Cotswolds, actually. In the Cotswolds region, that's where I'm big.
Yeah, in Canada, Canada couldn't give a shit.
Yeah, that's right.
They were like, I think near 100 or something. They were just like, yeah, we don't care.
Well, I'm excited that we cracked, it's basically the first time I've seen so much content being produced, but it's finally starting to roll out.
Yeah.
I know we've been recording for a while. Super excited. Excited about episode 5. We've got a bunch of stuff to cover. A bunch of stuff that's right on, that's very timely in the industry. The first thing we're going to touch on is bankruptcies and direct to consumer. We've seen a bunch of brands not make it in the last few months. We're going to talk about that. On the flip side of that coin, we're going to talk about overvalued startups. If you're a direct to consumer brand and you raised money 6 months ago, 8 months ago, a year ago, and you're trying to raise money again today, what are valuations looking like? And finally, we're going to touch a little bit about Klayvio. They raised $100 million from Shopify. Unclear what that valuation is like.
And are you invested in Klayvio?
I'm not an investor in Klayvio, but I've got exciting. I know a little bit about Klayvio investing that hasn't been disclosed, and I want to disclose it when we get to it.
Let's go.
Okay, but first things first, we're going to touch upon direct-to-consumer businesses that sort of just have not survived. Before we start, I want to make sure that we're really clear. It's not that they haven't survived because, there's been economic recession, a downturn in the direct-to-consumer industry. Logistics are much more difficult than they used to be. So it's not necessarily the fault of the founder. It's just things didn't work out.
Yeah, I like to usually say the car was moving. It just ran out of gas before it had to get where it needed to go.
Yeah, that's a great
It's not
point.
that it was a bad driver.
Yeah, and it turns out that there's far fewer gas stations in the world today than there were 6 months ago in terms of investment dollars. Let's talk about a few of them. A few of them we can talk about. A few of them we can't. Touch of Modern, which was really public, was a large men's flash sale site that didn't make it. Prey, which we might have actually touched on in one of our earlier calls. Yeah. They didn't make it. There was an Instagram post about it. One brand that's going to be announced, we're recording this on a Wednesday. It's going to be announced a few days from now. House, which you're an investor in, Nik. So curious to get your opinion. A couple other brands that I'm an investor in or an advisor, or at least talk to the founders once in a while, have reached out to me and said, hey, we're having a bit of a tough time. What should we be thinking about? And so I really want to discuss this. One is maybe we can touch on what happens when a business goes bankrupt. Have you seen these bankruptcies in the past, or you haven't?
I've just seen businesses go bankrupt.
Yeah.
But this is also the first time I'm seeing it on the other side where it's like, oh, I didn't realize when a business goes bankrupt, there's actually another company that tries to sell it. And there's this other side, which now I'm looking from this angle of oh, these are actually opportunities to go buy businesses.
Yeah, I'm on that angle sometimes, and sometimes on the angle of, all of my dollars I invest in this business are now worthless.
Yeah.
There are a few angles to look at bankruptcies from. I guess maybe we can touch on what happens. Generally, what happens in a bankruptcy is another entity will start running your business, or at least run an auction process for your business and start saying, okay, who wants to buy this business? There's multiple ways we can sell it. We can sell it as a going concern, as a business that it is, and sell you everything that's associated with it. And you go forward with this business and have a wonderful life. And you own all the assets of the business and none of the liabilities because those have gotten washed away in the bankruptcy. One of the other ways is we can sell it in terms of parts. We have an email list. Maybe we can sell the email list to 10 different people because everyone's interested in the native deodorant email list because it has a bunch of women who are wealthy and are willing to spend a lot of money on personal care and probably beauty products.
I want that
so maybe,
list.
10 different people are willing to buy that list. And maybe other people are willing to buy the IP. The IP we can only sell once, the trademark, the logo, any patents or anything to that effect. And so there are multiple ways to sell a business. And then there's another thing that you can do is just say, wind it down entirely. Hey, there's no buyers for this business. Let's try and sell whatever inventory we can, return as much of that money as we can to the creditors, the lenders of the business, and then we all go home. Usually you see brands trying to get sold for parts. Sometimes it's the email list. Sometimes it's the logo that's worth some money. Sometimes it's the inventory. Rarely is it sold as a going concern, although it is once in a while. I've looked at a few of these recently and I get excited about them because I always feel like it's going to be this flash sale for a business. And you're like, okay, here's this business. Something happened and it was terrible. It didn't work out for the founder. And that's really tough because they put their blood, sweat, and tears into it.
Yeah.
But it's an opportunity to buy a business that might have been overvalued for a far reduced price. And so whenever I get on a call like this, I'm always pretty excited about the opportunity.
Right.
But there's almost always some crazy hair on the deal. We owe a lot of money to the state government for state sales tax because we collected it and already spent that money and we don't have that money. And that liability goes through the bankruptcy. Whoever buys this business still has to pay this money to the state sales tax. Or we took money for a year subscription. Someone bought a year subscription in January. They were supposed to get 4 boxes. They've only gotten 1. You buy this business, you have to ship the other 3 or that customer's going to hate you forever. And so I've seen both of those things happen pretty recently, and it's been pretty crazy. But you were an investor in House. Tell me a little bit about how you found out and how that made you feel, all that kind of stuff. Tell me a bit about the details there.
I think it was a couple Fridays ago, and basically Helena just called me and was like, hey, just an FYI, our car ran out of gas before the finish line, and it was really close, but we just barely didn't make it. So House has Sharma Brands on as kind of their internal button pushers for e-commerce.
Yeah.
Because there's no internal e-commerce staff. And so
there's no internal e-commerce staff at House?
Yeah, there was. And then that entire team was let go. And so she was just calling to say I don't know when you're going to get paid. There's a good chance you will get paid, but you can pause working right now. And, just basically pause because I don't know what's next.
Sure.
And so at first I was really sad. I was like, damn, that was such an iconic brand. Every large alcohol company that I've worked with or talked to, whether it's Diageo, Anheuser-Busch, Beam Suntory, Bacardi, they all know House and they all admire House. Their boards make massive decisions in the company as a result of House existing. I also think 90% of direct-to-consumer alcohol companies wouldn't exist today if House wasn't there. House kind of paved that way or opened that market or opened that door. But then the second thought was all right, well, this is clearly probably not the most exciting time for Helena. So what can we do to help?
Yeah.
And,
she's great.
What can we do to support her?
I chatted with her once on the pretty recently on the phone. She's a really wonderful person. I really like it. And I'm constantly admire all of the founders of these businesses who are sort of winding up their businesses because they're always I want to take care of my employees.
Right.
I want to make sure that the brand ends up in a good place. I'm trying to find somebody who will continue to run it because even though I won't have any financial stake in this business, I still want to see this business succeed because I poured so much of my effort into this. And I'm always really impressed by that. I had a call recently with a brand that was, doing about $5 million in revenue a year or just a tad under. And they're running out of cash. They've fundraised and they're having a tough time fundraising. And, a lot of these businesses, and I don't want to speak to for any brand in particular, they think they've got a term sheet on the table, or they think they've got an M&A deal on the table. And so they're like, look, we're not going to fundraise right now until we sell this business, or we're not going to, we're about to sell this business. We don't need to fundraise, or the money's going to come in 2 weeks. So we think we're in a good position. And then all of a sudden that plan disappears. Yeah. And then you're, sort of on the creek without paddle. And that's really tough.
Totally.
There's this great brand in San Francisco called Chariot. And the guy, the CEO told me this.
The van?
The vans, yeah. He's like, we sold the business and we basically had like $4,000 left in the bank account when Ford bought the business. Oh my God. And Ford bought the business. They basically had to buy it or we're going to be out of money very soon. Ford bought the business and we spent the next $4,000 because we were going to have a party because the Ford team was there on that party. After they signed the docs, the deal was closed. We had $4,000. We spent it on food and alcohol, and that was it. That was the end of that. Like we had no more cash, and then Ford had to come in and sort of step in. But that was planned for, obviously, by everybody. And in any case, I was talking to this brand doing a few $1 million in revenue a year, and they're like, "What should we do?" And I was like, "You really need to push all of your vendors and your suppliers for terms, or if you're trying to pay back debt, call your debt provider and say, hey, look." We can't continue to pay $50,000 a month because we're going to be bankrupt. You'll basically get $50,000 in August, and in September, you'll get nothing because we're going to be in an assignment for the benefit of creditors or in bankruptcy. So I say, call all of your vendors up and all the people that you're paying on a monthly basis up and say, look, we can't pay you $50,000 a month. We can pay you $5,000. Right. And, we're committed that in a year and a half, we'll go back to $50,000 a month. Right. And we think you're going to like that because the alternative is you get 50 once and that's the end of the business and it's all over. Yep. And so, I would call all of my vendors up. Like a lot of times your suppliers or manufacturers will also extend terms and you have to sort of pay it back in 90 days. I'd say the same thing, which is, look, we can try and pay back a portion of it slowly and sort of have this layaway plan where we paid, we're giving you a little bit of cash, but we pay you once the business turns around. Yeah. Because if we don't wait for that, we're going to run out of cash right now and this business is over. Yeah. So I've been encouraging everyone to do that.
Yeah, totally. And also you have it written here, but some of the vendors to use to extend your payment terms, like last episode, we were talking about Parker a little bit. Yeah. Which gives you 60 days. Wayflyer is a great one for ads. Settle is great too. You can just literally upload invoices. So for our next production run, we have to sign up for Flexport, for example. Yeah. And you can pay with a credit card, but they're going to charge you 3%. Yeah. But I'm going to use Settle and I'll probably get 2% or 1.8%. Yeah. And so there's so many little hacks to just extend runway for an extra month or 2 months.
Definitely. Yeah. And I even mean let's say you've done that and you've gotten money with Settle or Clearbank or Wayflyer and you're having trouble, call them up and say, hey, look, Wayflyer, we owe you a ton of money. Yeah. We can pay one more month and then we're bankrupt. Right. So can we start working on some terms to make it so that this is a little bit easier for us? Totally. So that we can turn their ship around and make this business better. And that certainly works with a lot of big debt providers like banks. If you're a big portfolio company and you breach a covenant in one of your debt contracts, you call up your bank and they work out a plan. They're not like, great, the first thing I want to do is drive you into bankruptcy because there's not that much money there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If someone takes over long weekend tomorrow without you, they're not going to get all of the value that you can extract from it, right? There's a little bit of inventory, but someone's got to run that brand. Maybe they'll sell it to TJ Maxx for 10 cents on the dollar. You can get a lot more value out of it. So I always encourage people to make those calls and try and extend that runway.
Totally. Black Friday and Cyber Monday is just around the corner. In this economy, the brands that execute an own channel will dominate peak season this year. The time to build your subscriber list is now.
How can your campaign get heard above the noise? By getting on customers' home screens with a mobile app powered by TapCart.
By building your app subscriber list, this is where you own your customers. They want to hear from you. In fact, they expect to hear your great deals, and unlike SMS, push notifications are free to send and the delivery is instantaneous.
Get started right away at tapcart.com/limited for 2 months free. That's more than enough time to launch your app and start building your push subscriber list before spending a dime. Again, that's tapcart.com/limited. Let's switch to a different and slightly related gear, which is overvalued startups. Yeah. A lot of brands that I've chatted with recently have fundraised in a seed stage valuation that is bananas. I was chatting with a brand the other day that's doing less than $2 million a year, and they'd raise. They're like, we're trying to raise. We'd raised at a $30 million valuation previously, and now we're looking to raise at a $50 million valuation.
I never understood that game. It's like, how are you going to do it the second time? You know, what are you going to pull out of your hat?
Yeah, and I'm like, you know what? If this was 2021, or and money was flush and everyone was super excited about it, you might be able to get away with this game of I'm willing to bet the business that I'm going to be able to raise at a crazy valuation.
Right.
That doesn't happen now. Like, that is not going to happen. You are not going to be able to raise at a $50 million valuation. And I told them, I'm like, look, I'm interested in this business, but there's no opportunity. Like, this brand is not worth $50 million.
Yeah.
I
and it
sold
won't sell for 500.
Yeah, exactly. I sold my brand for 100 and we were doing north of 30 million in revenue a year. Like, that was a 3x valuation, a much higher scale.
Yeah.
You want 25x, are you going to be able to get to 30 million? That's really unclear. And then everyone will only 2x their money. You'll have to fundraise a lot between now and then.
Yeah.
And so what should these, I've been thinking recently, if you're an overvalued startup and you sort of aren't ready to take the valuation ding, or maybe you are, how do you approach it? Like, what do you start talking about? The way I think about it is first, look at the amount of runway you have. If you've got 18 to 24 months of runway, or more than 24 months of runway, you're probably okay in that you can ride whatever downturn we're in right now, and it's a little unclear, for 2 years, and hopefully the economy's turned around, and whatever valuation you had previously in 2021, you can get a jump from that in 2024.
Right.
But that's a lot of cash to have on hand to be like, look, I can hold this business for 2 years and then raise money.
Right.
So if you need money in the next 24 months and even worse in the next 12 months, I think there are a few things you got to do. I think one is, you've got to bring your operations you've got to right size the ship, which is lower staff, lower marketing, probably make it so that you're break even or so that you can control your own destiny. And then
I think how many SaaS companies are just going on credit cards every month that people just ignore.
What do you mean by that?
Recurring charges on credit cards, like Snipply that you used once 3 months ago and you don't use it anymore. Or, these random little apps.
Definitely.
So many of them.
Yeah, there was a great tweet where there's something called take my bill off or look at my bill or something, where it basically looks at what subscriptions you have. And someone tweeted out, I had 8 subscriptions. Truebill. Yeah. I signed up for Truebill to find out what they were and cancel them. And now I have 9 subscriptions because Truebill is that too. And I was like, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, there are a lot of hacks to try and reduce that burn. Yeah. One thing I always say is call up your credit card processing company, call up PayPal and try and reduce rates.
Yeah.
Because for God's sakes, you'll get the exact same service. There's very few opportunities in the world to get the exact same service and product for just cheaper from the same vendor. And Stripe and PayPal and Braintree and Authorize.net are perfect vendors like that.
Yeah. On the next episode, I'm going to teach you about procurement. And so it's kind of related here too.
I wonder what happens with these overvalued startups and how much of a haircut they have to take. Yeah. And are they better you stomach it early than later? Because if things get a lot worse between now and 6 months from now, your $30 million valuation may come down to 5, and you won't have any equity left.
It's just like a net zero game. Like if your valuation drops 6 times, sure, you're still the CEO and you're still running this business, and it's still worth a few $1 million. But your investors just took a 6x cut.
Yeah.
And it's just the biggest punch in the face to somebody who put money in.
Yeah.
And there was that period, when we started doing our Rumble and Smoothie, there was that period of we would just laugh at some of these valuations of that analytics company raising at almost 200 million and, just basically starting right there, although it seems like they grew fast. But there's so many of these companies that were it was the standard to raise at $100 million. Dude, $100 million. That was the standard for a seed stage, sometimes pre-launch company. And then it seems like everything has kind of gotten more back to normal. And obviously Shopify's earnings coming out and showing they're just barely above, or I think actually barely below where they were pre-pandemic. I think all these things are slowly correcting the markets and things are slowly getting back to normal. But yeah, man, the overvalued startup game makes no sense because how are you going to do it again? You know, if you're valued at, let's say I said long weekends, a $20 million valuation. We've shipped over 100,000 bars and blah, blah, blah. All right, so 20 million valuation. So you'd probably want to be doing at least 9 million before you could go raise again. But what if you can't get to that 9? You are screwed.
Yeah.
You're completely screwed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, really tough. And all the new investors will be like, why haven't you been able to succeed with all the money you've gotten? It's a big punch in the face.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. I think the next part of this conversation, or the next question people will have if they're listening to this is, okay, how do you figure out valuation then? And the way I always look, if you're in a seed stage round, it's a real art. Because there's no way people are valuing you on a function of revenue or EBITDA. Chances are you might not have EBITDA, and if you have some, it's really it's growing and changing so much. And if you have revenue, it's probably growing and changing a lot too, right? I remember when I started Native, we went from about 7,000 a month to 100,000 a month in about 6 months. If you had valued us at the 7,000 a month, Did we really increase the valuation of our business 20x or 18x between the 7 and 100K month? Probably not. And so it's a real art rather than science. But if you're a more mature stage startup, the one thing you can do is look at public comps. What are other companies in your business trading at? And you can try to do this in a public and private way. It's really hard in a private way, which is like, okay, what business raised, like Athletic Greens raised recently? Okay, what was their revenue and how much did they raise and what was the valuation, right? And you could say, okay, they raised at X valuation to their revenue. And a lot of that isn't public. So really hard to do for a brand like Athletic Greens. But, look at publicly traded companies and at least you'll get some sort of sense of what the world looks like.
Right.
Like what does Procter & Gamble look like? I think P&G is generally like 5x revenue and like 20 some X earnings. You might not have any earnings and, you're growing way faster because P&G doesn't really grow beyond inflation or anything. Or look at a smaller startup like Edgewell or look at a beauty company like Estee Lauder. Like put yourself in a world of like, what do other businesses, if I'm a mature business, what do other businesses in this category that are more mature than me, what do they trade at from a revenue and earnings perspective to get a sense of what the world looks like? And if you're going through M&A, I can tell you that the guy or woman who's buying your business is buying your P&L.
Yeah.
She's going to have to sort of justify this. She's going to take a hit to the cash that she has to show that these earnings make sense. And her bonus is going to be based on how well you do. So that stuff is going to matter.
Yep.
And if you're a small business selling to a small business that's public, the CEO is his salary, his compensation is going to be partly based on how well your company performs. So he's definitely going to be looking at your profit and your revenue. Totally. It's not just like people who are like, this brand is beautiful. Let's go ahead and put money in this. That's not what it is. This is a numbers game at that level.
Completely agreed.
Let's switch gears one more time and talk about news from this week. Klayvio got a $100 million investment from Shopify. I have this one piece of information I know about. So Klayvio is raised, I remember, from a company called Summit Partners, which is a private equity firm based in Boston. I know they raised from them because when Summit also looked at Native, we ultimately didn't end up going with them, but they asked me a bunch of questions about Klayvio. So I think they were looking at the Klayvio deal while they were trying to buy Native.
That's funny.
And I remember I've gotten this piece of information from about 15 sources now, so I'm not revealing any sources. 15 people have told me Klayvio has no preferred stock. It only has common stock. Usually a company will have preferred stock to their investors. So let's say I invested $1 million in Long Weekend at a $5 million valuation. Things didn't go well. It became bankrupt. I've got preferred stock. So you issued me preferred stock when I invested in $1 million. That basically means that the first $1 million the business gets back, I get back first. So let's say the business sells for $500,000. I actually get all $500,000. And the rationale is I put in $1 million. I'm not getting all of my money back.
Right.
I only got, but I put in the cash. So I should get my cash back first.
Yep.
Now, if the business ends up selling for $10 million, I don't get my $1 million first back. We just split it immediately because I get $2 million return. So usually businesses will issue preferred stock and investors will get preferred stock because they want their cash back before, if the business doesn't do well.
Right.
Klayvio is one of the few and maybe the only business I know of that has only issued common stock. So if I put in $1 million in common stock, if I bought $1 million of stock of Klayvio and the business sold for $100,000, I would be pari passu or equal to everybody else who had any stock. I wouldn't get my money back first.
Right.
Which is really interesting. I'm not it shows how strong Klayvio is that they can get their investors to take common stock. I know of no other brand, like even Stripe issues preferred stock to their investors.
Right.
I know of nobody who issues common stock to investors except Klayvio. It's a real sign of like a strength of a brand and a company to be like, look, I can give you common stock. I don't know what Shopify got yet.
Yeah, it's almost like, well, if you want in, you come to us. We're not going to come to you.
And you're on the same level as me. So I'm a founder.
And every employee.
Yeah, and every employee. Yeah. You don't get your money back first.
I think it's a great culture hook. Like it's as an employee, I'd be thrilled to know that, the founders like don't have any preference over me. And, it's everybody wins together. Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy.
Or we all lose together.
Yeah. I guess Klayvio is such a strong brand. I don't think there's a realistic possibility of it losing.
Yeah.
But it is a real sign of strength. I'm not sure how much employees are cognizant of this. I take that back.
I don't think,
I've heard it from 15 different sources, ex-employees, a bunch of other people. And so maybe they are really smart about it.
I do think though, there's like actually a huge opportunity of educating employees what stock is and how it works and how they make money and how they lose money and how taxes work. That's something I don't even know personally still.
Like the difference between options on RSUs and when you've got to file documents and what taxes look like at the end of this is a huge black box. We got to get more into depth in this because I think a lot of companies are giving out these options, but we're going to have to do that on another episode. The one thing I wanted to talk about was about Klayvio and Shopify, though, is we always talk about Shopify as an app store, and Shopify has built this amazing backbone, and they sort of have this free market app store. And I always encourage Shopify to build more native apps within their platform. Like they should have a subscription app. They should have, a post-purchase upsell inside Shopify. They don't have a lot of those things. Then there's the idea that, okay, if they're not going to build them internally, there's this free market for them. The weird part is I feel like Shopify is using like this Midas hand to select certain apps that are going to win. They've invested in Affirm, they've invested in Stripe, they've invested in Yotpo, I think Recharge, definitely Pipe, and now Klayvio. And I wonder what type of benefit those brands get as a result of this investment. You never see Apple investing in apps on their app store, right? You don't see Apple being like, oh, let's invest in Uber. They're like, no,
right.
Either we own it or it's an app store. This category is owned by the app store. It's not an investment.
Yeah. So one of my portfolio companies is also invested in by Shopify. And basically...
Is it gorgeous?
No.
Okay.
But basically what they get is they do a Shopify investor town hall. So all their founders flew into New York a couple weeks ago. And Toby's here and Harley's here and their VP of product. And I think it's just really access and how can we work together and how can we build shit that merchants need? And they're super aware of what Shopify is working on launching in the next 2 years and vice versa. And so I think it's really just access.
Shopify should either have things natively or be a free market for apps so that people produce the best apps.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's if I was Afterpay, I'd be like, what the fuck, or Klarna or, now...
Omnisend or Help Scout. But what else can you do? You're sort of in the space. You can't be like, I'm not doing anything for Shopify.
Yeah, I think there's been a few tweets where people have caught, more promotion of Yotpo, for example, on the Shopify App Store. Also, I remember Googling Shopify reviews and Yotpo has that word to them or there was something with Google search where I was like, this is kind of shady. I mean, I heard they invested in Yotpo because Yotpo is about to go public or was supposed to go public. Yeah. So it's all right, well, why would a CFO not put some money in and quadruple it? But yeah, it is kind of weird. I don't know that I like it that much because it's like playing favorites,
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't give for example, why would somebody be motivated to go build the next reviews app or the next subscription app if it's well, I'm not going to be able to win exactly where, I don't want to go deal with Magento customers and Salesforce customers. I want to win here. And these guys have already decided who they're going to win.
Yeah. They're putting a little finger down on the scale and being like, you know what, this guy's going to win. I couldn't agree more with that. Imagine if Apple was like, you know what, we're going to invest in Lyft.
Yeah.
You know what? I would imagine that Uber's you search Uber on the App Store and it's really hard to find it. Yeah. It just seems like Apple would never do anything like that. They'd do a lot of things and they'll buy apps and they'll natively integrate them and they'll be like, you know what? You've got this app out there. Fuck you. We're going to make our own, right?
Exactly.
Gmail, Google had in Maps. They're like, Google Maps. They're like, we're going to create our own. A long time ago, people had a flashlight app. They're like, fuck it. We're going to create our own, right?
Exactly.
That I can understand. They're like, look, we're going to take good ideas and create them ourselves, or we thought of these ourselves and we just didn't have time to release them.
And all those were also in the benefit of the end consumer.
Yeah.
Where I feel like Yotpo is definitely not in the benefit of the end consumer, and neither is Recharge. But it's kind of weird. It's like choosing your favorite child and then being like, this one's going to Harvard and that one can fight on the street.
That's right. Yeah. I've decided this. Yeah, that's right. I'm spending all of my money to send this kid to school. Other kid.
Oh, you need a car? Here's a Lamborghini, and you get a 1984 Camry.
That's hilarious. So Indian of you to mention a Toyota Camry.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, those are the things I wanted to chat about on episode 5. Episode 6, you created an agenda. I don't understand any of the agenda.
All right. So next episode, we are going to talk about Canopy's president, Ali Webb, who's the founder of Drybar, Apple's DSP, which I read about today, and 2 more things I'll say. One is building companies on top of really hard industries, really where there's a lot of rules. And then the second one we'll talk about is procurement, because last night you were like, what the fuck is procurement? And I haven't been so excited to tell you about something since for a while.
Okay,
so
awesome.
That's on the next episode.
Okay, see you on episode 6. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next time to cut through the noise in CPG, retail, and e-commerce.
And if you enjoyed this episode, then why not share it with a friend? And be sure to subscribe on whatever platform you listen to your podcasts on.